But Catholics kneel before statues. Isn't that worship? Is every act of kneeling automatically worship? The answer lies in latria versus dulia. If I kneel before a king, am I saying the king is God? If someone kneels when proposing marriage, are they worshiping their fiancé? The physical gesture does not automatically determine the theological meaning. Posture is not intent. Then, what do Catholics mean by veneration? Catholic theology distinguishes worship from honor. The absolute worship reserved for God alone is called latria. The honor and veneration we give to the saints is called dulia. And the special honor given to Mary is known as hyperdulia. We don't believe a statue is God. We don't believe wood or plaster has divinity. The honor directed toward an image can refer beyond the material object to the person represented. So the statue itself isn't the object of divine worship? Correct. Then the real question becomes, did God forbid sacred images, or did he forbid turning images into gods?
Fine, but the cherubim were different. What about the bronze serpent? That is actually the perfect example. God himself commanded Moses to make a bronze serpent. He raised it on a pole, and those who looked at it lived. But they weren't supposed to worship the serpent. Exactly. And that distinction is the entire issue. An image can exist without being a false god. Idolatry happens when a created object is treated as divine or given the absolute worship that belongs to God alone. That is why centuries later, in 2 Kings chapter 18, the exact same bronze serpent was destroyed because the Israelites had crossed the line and started burning incense to it. So the same physical object could be legitimate at one point and become sinful when people worshipped it? Precisely. The problem wasn't bronze, the problem was idolatry.
Fine, but God is invisible. Why make an image of Jesus? Because Christianity says something extraordinary. God became visible. As Scripture says, the Word became flesh. He is the image of the invisible God. Jesus Christ is not merely an invisible concept. The eternal Word truly became man. But doesn't the commandment still warn us about images? Yes, idolatry remains forbidden, but the incarnation changes the question. The Catholic Church does not teach us to worship wood, plaster, paint, or stone. We worship Christ. The image points beyond itself to the person represented. So your argument isn't that every religious image is automatically acceptable. Exactly. The biblical question is whether the image becomes an idol, or whether it serves as a reminder and representation of the person we honor. So here's the question for you. If God became visible in Jesus Christ, why would depicting Christ automatically be idolatry? The question remains, image or idol? What does the Bible actually teach?
Catholics have statues everywhere. You see them in every single parish. Doesn't Exodus 20 say, "Do not make graven images"? How do you justify ignoring a direct commandment? It's a great question. Yes, Exodus 20 forbids idolatrous images. The Church completely agrees with that. But here's the question. Did God forbid all religious images, or just the worship of false gods? Isn't that exactly what the commandment says? Any carved statue is a violation. If that were true, the Bible would contradict itself. Then let's look at what God commanded Moses immediately afterward. Right after giving the 10 Commandments, God gives instructions for building the holiest space on earth. In Exodus 25, he explicitly tells Moses, "Make 2 cherubim of gold." God commanded images of cherubim to be made for the Ark of the Covenant, placing them right where his presence would dwell. But those weren't idols. Nobody was worshiping those golden angels. Exactly. So perhaps the real question isn't simply, are there images? The real question is, how are those images being used? Are they idols being worshipped, or are they sacred art pointing us to heaven?